What's up, guys? Ladies. And welcome back to another episode of Punker Mike's Custom Action Figure Showcase. In this episode, I'm going to be showcasing my custom Nosferatu Zodd action figure. Alright, so kicking it off, if you guys aren't familiar with Nosferatu Zodd, he is a character in Kentaro Miura's Berserk. Now, Berserk's probably one of my favorite manga series. It's a long-running series. It's awesome. I love the artwork. And it also has a decent anime as well. Now, the newer anime is complete shit. But if you flash back to the 90s anime, it's pretty decent. It only covers a small part of the story, but it's a good introduction to the series. And last time I checked, someone uploaded the whole 90s Berserk anime series on YouTube, so you could probably check it out that way. Like I said, the original anime is a pretty good introduction into the series, but the manga is definitely where it's at. Now, this custom's made up of a couple different parts. So the biggest part, the base, is a Mythic Legion's Bolthar the Tower. So when I saw the pre-order listing for this, I immediately thought I can make a Nosferatu Zodd out of that. So I pre-ordered it, waited about a year for it to come in. When it came in, it was a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. So I ordered him and the giant ogre to go with it, thinking I could mash the two parts together, because the ogre's got a pretty good face, just had to tweak a couple different things. Obviously have to sculpt the hair, the nose, there's a lot of sculpting to go with it. So I was planning on mashing those two together to somehow make a Zodd. And my buddy Adam Van Prospect, aka Playing With Myself on Instagram, let me know that the Berserk Art of War figures, their Nosferatu Zodd from that line, the parts are just about perfect to fit on the Mythic Legions figure. Now, fun fact, back in the day, when I was probably in junior high, we took a trip to Universal Studios in Hollywood. And on City Walk, there's a comic book / like toy and game and kind of nerd store called Things from Another Planet, I believe. And they had the Art of War figures there. And that was probably my first import figure I ever bought, was the Guts. And that's before I even knew who Guts was. I didn't even know what Berserk was. The figure just looked so amazing that I had to buy it. And I remember at the time it was like $20 or $25, which was crazy for an action figure when I was that young. But that was probably my favorite figure for the longest time. The only thing is, nowadays, those figures go for a grip. So I know hunting this figure down was going to be a hassle. And big, huge, fatty shout out to Gothams_Owl on Instagram as well. Adam let me know that he was the one that showed him the recipe mixing the Bolthar and Mythic Legions figure with the Art of War Zodd figure. And like I was saying, these Art of War figures are pretty hard to come by at a decent price. I was hoping to spend, around $50 or so. I know that's kind of expensive for a figure when you're just going to use the head and a couple parts. But if you kind of break it down to how much sculpting and time I'd have to put in to make the head and all these accessories and sculpt and get it to where I want it, I mean, $50 for me is well worth that. The only thing is, this figure goes for way more than 50 bucks. Luckily, I did some research outside your usual eBay, Mercari type sites, and I found a guy who used to be an eBay seller. Now he has his own website and he sells used imports, kind of like Mandarake in Japan, but he's got his own little personal site. And guess what? Found him for 50 bucks. Come on! Alright, so I'm finishing up painting, getting near the assembly process. So I still gotta paint the belt, and this is the belt that came off of the Art of War Zodd figure. You can see he's fucking stripped everything off him, so he's a little naked ass boy right here. Just gotta paint the silver parts and then glue the fur on there. So I got a bunch of this fur. This is from a stuffed teddy bear. I think it was on a bear, just like a stuffed animal I found at the thrift store. Had some decent fur. Obviously the fur's super long, so I'll have to trim it down. Started painting the weapons. Need to finish painting those and add some nasty blood and guts to them and everything. The sheath for his big ass blade, I'm probably going to make my own. I'll keep this belt, but this is actually non-functioning. You can see it has this a little slit in it. So I'm actually going to probably make mine out of some fake leather I have or some shit. The boots, so the human form of Zodd kind of has more of just leathery style boots. So the stock boots, had all the spikes and everything on them. So I sanded, dremeled, smooth as I could, and then to fill in the gaps I have some milliput epoxy. I'm gonna have to smooth that over, sand that, and then paint those bad boys. So the ankle pieces, I'm gonna paint these the same as I paint the boot color, just to match. Most of the ankle is gonna be covered up, and then these parts too are gonna be covered up by the fur. So same thing, these are just dremeled, heavily dremeled down and sanded from the stock boots. See, he's got a lot of nice sculpt on them, but I didn't need any of that sculpt because it's going to be covered by the fur boy. Just about done painting him. So I had to Dremel out the head, Dremeled that out, put a magnet in it, a little bit of sculpt so it fits good on the ball. Put a magnet right there. Because I also had to touch up the head. He had like a lot of forehead going on. Like they didn't paint all the way. So I had to like touch up the hair on the forehead. So it's crazy how the head fits like almost perfect on this thing. Obviously, once you heat and pop it off the original figure, you're going to have to do a lot of dremeling because the peg systems are different. So this one has like a big ball. I actually put a magnet at the tip, and then I dremeled it out and I put a magnet in there. So that way, snaps right on. I mean, you do get some articulation. I think eventually I want to find a way to make it so he can have a hinge where he can look up and down, because the way it's positioned, he's kind of looks slightly down, which is okay because, you know, he's so freaking tall that he's going to look down just about at everybody. Cool thing too is that the paint on the Art of War Zodd, super close match to the Boltar figure. Almost. The Boltar figure is more of like a peachy Caucasian type skin tone, where Zodd has more like tannish, brownish undertones. So I ended up just repainting the whole figure. So I actually started off with just doing like kind of like a little wash and a little dry brushing, and then I ended up just repainting the whole figure. Let a lot of that detail and sculpt kind of pop. And then going down to the chest harness is from the Art of War, and it fits just about perfect. Like the length, everything's so perfect on this. It's crazy how good that these parts mesh together. Like I said, the Boltar figure is pretty big. I mean, I'll show you in a little bit scale-wise. He towers over the Figma guts, where in actuality, Zodd's a huge guy. In his human form, he's huge, but he's not like crazy savage huge. He has another form where it's like his apostle demon type form where he's fucking huge. But in this form, he's big, but he's not crazy giant huge. But, I mean, all these parts work so well together that the scale doesn't bother me whatsoever. So those chest straps are perfect. And then you get to the little girdle part. That's also part of the original figure. And that spiky belt is part of the original figure. Like I said, perfect. Now the fur is something that I had to make myself. Not really make, but I had to rig on there myself. So at the thrift store, I found a long, shaggy teddy bear. Had long, shaggy brown hair. So I ripped him apart. Once I found the shapes that I wanted, I glued it on there. And then I had to trim it. So I used like feathering shears and scissors, and I cut down the hair. I got a little bit of watered down Mod Podge and just lightly brushed it on there, and then with the comb brushed the hair down. That way it wasn't like all fuzzy and puby, where it just kind of goes straight down and it looks a little nappy. And big fatty shout out to Chris Cerda and Craig Warwick. A couple of their recent customs, they've been gluing fabric on their action figures, and they've been using this fabric tag. Now I've done a couple customs where I've been gluing fabric on with Joker from Akira and the Pizza Face figure. The only thing is I was using super glue, and although super glue is a nice bond, it's really tough to work with. It's got a quick drying time. There's really no forgiveness. With this stuff, so much easier. Seems to be holding up great. So thanks for the tip, guys. And then you can start seeing on the lower half, I did do a little bit of blood splatter. Now I didn't want to go too crazy with the blood, so I just put little mist on his hands, his thighs, and a little bit on the forearms. I didn't want to go too crazy. I mean, you can see I went crazy with the blades because I wanted the blades nasty and nice and chunky. But the overall splatter on him and everything, I wanted it just to be a little bit. I didn't want it to overpower. And for the boots, I did use the Mythic Legions boots. So I used these exact ones right here. I just did a lot of dremeling. So all the spikes and everything, I just dremeled those down, shaved pretty much everything down with my Dremel, sanded it nice and smooth. And then some of the parts that needed a little more smoothing over, I went ahead and filled that with sculpt. And then the top parts, that's where I glued the fur on. I just, mashed it around, glued it on. Like I said, trimmed it down, put a little bit of that water Mod Podge to get a little matty. And then the boots I just painted brown and then put some blood splatter on those. And the boots look pretty plain. I mean, they're just like rounded out leather looking boots. And I just used a couple different shades of brown. I even used some powdered pigment. And then just a little bit of blood splatter. Like I said, I didn't want to go too crazy with the blood, but I did want the blood to be present. And as far as the weapons go, these are the ones from the Art of War Zodd figure. So these are the same exact ones. I mean, I was able to salvage a lot of parts from that figure. And I just repainted them, but I did a lot of silver dry brushing, a couple washes on there to bring out some of the sculpt, make them look gritty and grimy. And then with the Citadel blood for the blood god, I just put a bunch of layers on there. You can see I tried to get it nice and chunky on there, because he seems like a savage that wouldn't clean the blood off. He just let it rot on his blades. So you can see that Zodd figure towers over the Figma. So not 100% accurate, but like I said, the figure looks so clean. Those parts fit so perfect that scale doesn't bother me whatsoever. I think he scales pretty good with these generic little knights that I made. Most of these are made out of the Toy Biz Dr. Doom. Just repainted them and modded them and made some heads. There's only a couple of them. I have some more on the shelf. And then I have a bunch more that I'm trying to make. Trying to make a good size army of these. And this blood for the blood god Citadel paint is really good for making blood. So when I make little mods and stuff like this, little custom figures, sometimes I take parts off of say like Toy Biz Lord of the Rings. And then I just have extra parts left over. So here's an example. Just like a figure I had left over. I got like in a lot probably, and he was just one I didn't need. So I kind of just chewed him up. Cut his arms and hands off, piece of his head. Sometimes I'll fill the gap with like hot glue and then kind of tacky it up and then throw a little bit of red paint, just a Citadel red paint, and then once that dries, throw the blood for the blood god on there. So you can have a bunch of these like dismembered pieces. It's kind of good to have in the background, or like heads that you're not going to really use. Oh my Zodd. And again, fatty shout out to Adam, and fatty shout out to Gothams_owl on Instagram. Great recipe. Super stoked to have this custom in my collection. Pretty easy kit bash once you have all the parts you need. It was a fun little build, and hope you guys enjoy it. Hope it inspired you. You can check out some of my other videos. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can check me out on Instagram. My handle is punker_Mike, and we'll see you next time. It's a great recipe. Super stoked to have this custom in my figure. Whoa. Super stoked to have this custom in my figure. What does that even mean?